Hi, good afternoon. It's Yuliya, EducAd Consulting here, and today we have invited Mr. White to talk about online tutoring. Hi, Philip.
Hello, Yuliya.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. So could you please tell me what inspired you to do teaching maths?
Well, actually, it dates back to when I myself was at school, and as about a 13-year-old, I went to school in Leicester in the Midlands in England. And I had a friend at school who was in the same maths class as me, and we both really enjoyed maths. And we said to the teacher one day, could we please take one of the lessons? And the teacher said yes. So we taught the whole class, if my memory is correct, on circle geometry. And it went down very well. And that was the sort of start of it. And obviously I didn't think about teaching maths for many years until probably I was in my sort of mid-20s. And that was the sort of seed that led to where I am now.
Oh, that's so funny. I had a very similar story. When I was in primary school, I also was given a few chances to lead the class, just as a joke, really, for 10 minutes. And that's what inspired me to become a primary school teacher. So
Excellent, brilliant.
Coincidence there. I think maybe
absolutely.
That should be part of the curriculum maybe now for children.
It's a small world. It really is. But actually, that would be a good idea, because a good way to learn a subject is to actually try and teach it.
Absolutely.
So if school children were asked to get up in front of the class, provided they wanted to, then that would be a good experience for them. So,
yeah, and I think for me then what kept me going and what made me really enjoy it was the rewarding part, when you really feel that you're making an impact.
Yeah, there's so many facets to teaching or tutoring. It's not just the subject that you're teaching, it's that whole bonding process with somebody and all the different interactions that you have with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, so you've been working with us for a long period already and with different clients, and we always get amazing feedback from children and parents. But in your opinion, what do you think makes a good tutor? What qualities do you have to possess?
Well, first of all, you have to be very, very passionate and enthusiastic about the subject that you're teaching, because I think there are too many teachers that it's just a job. And if you don't have that passion or enthusiasm, then you cannot really convey it to anybody else. Obviously, you have to know the subject that you're teaching. You have to have real empathy for who you're teaching. Often you'll get somebody who's very good at a subject like maths, for example, and they might be brilliant at it themselves, but they cannot actually put themselves in the position of who they're trying to teach, and that they're not seeing it from the same perspective. Yeah. So you really do have to have empathy. You have to have the ability to connect with people, and to view everybody you teach as an individual. Yeah. Because I learn so much from the pupils that I teach, and they've taught me as much, really, in many ways, as I have taught them. And if you don't, providing you never stop learning, and you think, well, today I'm, and often you'll be surprised as to the things that you do learn. So it's not putting yourself on a pedestal, it's being able to connect with people. And obviously, if they connect with you and you build that rapport, then that really is half the battle.
A mutual respect, yes. And
absolutely, definitely. But having said that, Yuliya, you do still need a certain sort of hierarchy. I think if you try and,
there should be a balance.
I think sometimes the sort of trend towards teachers becoming their pupils' friend is not necessarily helpful. Although I should add to that, many pupils that I've had over the years have become my friends since, really. In fact, I had one pupil, and I went to her wedding many years later, which was great. So that's a process that can happen later, but it is important to make that distinction.
Well, you can certainly have a laugh during the lesson, but as long as
you're
here with the teaching part.
Yeah, and also if you can tap into what makes each individual pupil tick, so if you can find out what their interests are, then that also is extremely helpful. Yeah. I mean, if a pupil thinks to themselves, "Oh no, it's Mr. White maths. Oh dear, we've got," that's not really what I'm aiming for. I mean, obviously you want them to learn, and it's important that you get the work done. But at the same time, if you can actually talk to them as an individual and find out what they like and what makes them tick, that really is crucial.
Yeah. And in terms of age of children that you work with, do you have a preferred age you like to teach more than other, or what is your span of, is it all secondary school ages? What are your students?
Well, that's a really good question, actually, because obviously I've done a lot of secondary school pupil, A-level pupil tutoring, and I've had some great pupils. I've still got some great pupils. But actually, I do really enjoy teaching younger pupils, because 7 sort of 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, because actually you can learn a lot from youngsters because they're completely honest with you. They don't have any sort of social aspects that they've learned that they think, oh, I can't say that.
Yes.
And you can really be innovative and creative with young pupils, and they'll often really respond to that. So yeah, but I also do. I've had adults that I've tutored, vocational qualifications, nurses, engineers. So yeah, a whole range. I think having the whole range is brilliant.
Yeah.
Really.
And obviously, with us, we have clients who would like or ask us for a tutor or some academic support for different reasons. Sometimes it's, intensive few weeks, so it could carry on for years. So is that what the picture that you usually have with your students? Do you have more of short-term students or long-term students? Is it more of preparation for a certain exam, or what are the reasons for tutoring, and how long does it usually last?
Well, over the years, I've tutored 3 students from Key Stage 2 primary, sort of year 5 or 6, continuously all the way to A grade at A-level maths.
Okay.
So most of my pupils I tend to have for a long time, which is great because, for example, if I've got a year 8 or 9 pupil and I know that they're improving in maths, they want to do maths, then I'm always thinking of the bigger picture and thinking, right, okay, let's give them a good foundation for GCSE and A-level. If you have obviously I have had pupils who've come to me and they say, oh, I've got a GCSE in 2 months' time. Then that's fine, but it doesn't work as well because you don't get the opportunity to sort of build that foundation and obviously build the same rapport as you do with somebody that you have for a longer period. So
yeah, absolutely.
And can I just say, one of my most, if somebody said to me, if you had to choose one pupil that you've ever had, that is probably your sort of proudest success, really, it was a boy I had, and he started with me in year 5, and he was heavily dyslexic.
Okay.
And and the problem obviously is that if you're labelled at school, it can significantly, absolutely. And I had him every week, and for the first 2 or 3 years, it was quite hard going. And then all of a sudden, it was a real light bulb moment. It started to click, and we went beyond that. He did GCSE, he did A-level, and now he's doing sort of physics research at Oxford University. So fantastic, huge. And but without the time period, we would not have been able to build that rapport.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could obviously see the benefit for this particular child. What about others? Because I know sometimes that, or I see it rarely, but it does happen. If tutoring happens for a very long period of time, then sometimes children find it difficult to actually then start studying themselves afterwards. Or so what do you think are the main benefits of long-term and short-term tutoring for the students?
Well, that's a good question. I think obviously short term, then obviously it has to be very focused in terms of what their immediate needs are. So if they need to get a certain grade in an exam at GCSE or A-level, then that is the goal. Long term, it's more pliable, really. It's about building confidence, self-esteem, and obviously interacting with the parents. I mean, the children that I've tutored and that I've taught over the years, it's very much also in terms of interaction with the parents. And obviously they can see the long-term benefits of that, but it has to be very focused. And obviously you do have to try and instill a sense of discipline that, you cannot obviously rely on somebody telling you what to do all the time, or especially obviously for pupils that go off to university, because they're going to be very much have to be self-motivated and self-disciplined.
And in terms of communication with parents, do you give regular feedback? Do you have conversations with parents, or how does it usually happen?
I do. I've always had regular feedback is really important. I've always had a system of progress reports sort of at the end of each term. And obviously it is very important because parents are obviously employing you to do a job. It's important that not only are they getting value for money, they're also getting good information about what stage. And obviously I make suggestions to parents about what their pupils could be, or what their children rather should be doing. So yes, feedback is really important.
Yeah, I know with our clients, you send PDF files of the actually writing up of the lesson every time. And even for me, it's very interesting to actually see the progress of the, I mean, I'm not that good at A-level math, let's say, and that is understatement, not good at all. But like, it's really good to actually, you know, for parents to have this record and for the child to go back to it whenever they maybe have forgotten something or they want to refer to what they have covered with you as well. So I think that is really, really beneficial.
Absolutely. Can I just also add, I'm a big fan of a lot of tutors don't set homework, but I do, because it provides, obviously it provides continuity, and it provides a link from one lesson to another and a focus. So, and it obviously, it's a bit like anything, is that to become a really good footballer, you have to practice kicking a ball against a wall. You have to become a good pianist, takes hours and hours of practice. And if you want to be good at anything in life, and obviously maths has got so many applications and so many careers that are connected to it, then you have to, you have to work at it.
Yeah, I'm a homework fan as well. I mean, it solidifies the knowledge that you have received and also gives you the opportunity to actually work independently and practice those skills. Absolutely. And then maybe raises some questions for the next lesson.
Definitely.
So how do you plan your lessons? How do you usually, do you have like a long-term plan, a short-term plan, or each lesson is, you know, you plan next lesson after the previous one, depending on the, you know, the feedback that you got?
Well, that's a good question also, Yuliya, because I like being a creative tutor. I don't like I mean, a lesson plan isn't like a sort of a precise set of instructions about what will be covered in the lesson. So with over sort of, I mean, I've calculated I've done somewhere between 10 and 15,000 hours of one-to-one tuition.
Oh, wow.
So
over a period of how many years?
30. Okay. So obviously I've got a lot stored in my memory bank. I've had a lot of situations with a lot of pupils of different ages, different requirements, and obviously I draw on that. But having said that, for each individual lesson, I do obviously look at what I think would be the best materials to use. I have actually created a lot of my own resources over the years, which you've probably seen some of them.
Yes, of course.
Which is good. But yes, and obviously it's always looking at the bigger picture. You know, I've got a year 10 pupil. Okay, what do I need to give them now to really help them in the future? So, for example, if somebody's doing GCSE and they're in year 10, and I know that there's a good chance they're going to do A-level, I'm also aware that lots of GCSE pupils don't have quite sufficient skills in certain key areas for A-level. So I'll be actually planning to basically give them those skills, particularly in things like algebra and fractions and indices. And so that's it. I'm always thinking about the bigger and longer term picture. Right, good morning. This is a tutorial on finding the intersection point of two straight lines, and I've got my student Nizar with me. Nizar is going to help me answer this particular question. So we have point A, which has coordinates 1, 1, so that tells us what the scale is on the x-axis and the y-axis. So let's write that down. Okay. So what's the coordinate of this point here where it meets the x-axis?
At 1, 0.
Well, note it would be
not negative 1, 0.
Negative 1, 0. Good. So x is -1 and y is 0. So just put that down. Just write that on here. Change my color. Right. And whereabouts does it intersect the y-axis here?
3.
Good. So that's 3. Okay. So first of all, is the gradient of the green line positive or negative? Is the line, as we go from left to right, is the line going up or down?
Up. So it's positive.
Right. And how do we work out the gradient?
X, changing y over x.
Changing y over changing x. Good. So what does that give us?
Be 3.
Good. Right. So how do we solve that?
So we get the x is all on one side.
Mm-hmm.
So add half x.
Good. Add half x to both sides. So what does that make on the left-hand side?
3.5 x.
Yep, that sounds good. So I'm going to write 3.5 x as an improper fraction. So that's 7 over 2x. You happy with that?
Yeah.
And then what do we do?
Subtract subtract 3.
Yep, subtract 3 from both sides. So if we've already got a -3 on the right-hand side. Yeah. So if we, so what does that give?
-6.
Good. So once we've got the x coordinate, we can work out the y value down here.
Yeah.
How do we do it?
We'd substitute the value for x into x.
Yep, so you can substitute into either equation. Which one do you think is the easier one to go for?
3x plus 3.
Yep, it's a little bit easier to work with, isn't it? So we'll use the green line then. So if x is -12/7, if we substitute into the equation of the green line, y is going to be 3x plus 3, so that's 3 times -12/7. Let's do this distance here. So I'm taking that as the base, which is this distance.
Okay.
Yeah? How far is it from there to there?
6.
Yep, good. So that's 6. Let's just change it. I've got that in orange, that's fine. So the base is 6, and the height, which is this distance here, in terms of the graph, that would be the distance from P to the y-axis, yeah?
Yeah.
How far is that?
12/7.
Perfect, good, yes, that's like this x coordinate, but we don't need the negative, we're just interested in the length of that line. So that's 12/7. And how do we work out the area of a triangle?
Height, half height times base.
Yep. So any questions?
No, that sounds good.
So just a quick recap then. So we worked out the equations of the two lines by, first of all, just getting up for your notes. So we worked out the equations of the two lines. First of all, we had to work out the gradient of each line. The red line we could see was negative, the green line was positive. We knew where the two lines intersected the y-axis, so using y is mx plus c, we wrote down the two equations, with the coefficient of x being the gradient and the number here at the end being the y-axis intercept. To find the intersection point, we set the equations equal to each other, so 3x plus 3 equals -1/2x minus 3. Rearranged, we've got x as -12/7, and once we've found the x coordinate, you can either substitute into that equation or that equation. It won't make much difference, but this was easier to substitute into with the numbers. So you ended up with a y coordinate of -2 1/7. And then to work out the area of this triangle, best to think of it as this is the base and that is the perpendicular height. So the base was 6, the perpendicular height was 12/7. Half base times height, and we got the answer as 5 1/7. See how that is on?
Yeah.
Excellent, good. And another thing I'd like to say is that I also place particular emphasis on real-world maths, because a lot of children at school, they sit in maths lessons at school, and I mean, to be fair to a lot of teachers, they have a very difficult job. Yes, you know, you look at today's generation of teenagers and young people, and it's different to when I was a teenager. Yeah.
They all say that, though. Every generation says that.
But somehow you have to engage and motivate these young people, and you have to keep them motivated. And if I can show them actually that maths isn't this dull subject that you do at school from 9 o'clock till 10:30 on a Monday morning because you have to fill up the timetable, but it has all these weird and wonderful uses in the real world, then that is fantastic. Because so many children learn maths as this dull subject that they do it because they're told to do it, they have to do it, but they don't really see why they're doing it. And if you can really show them why they're doing it, that is terrific.
Yeah, related to the real world. And
Absolutely.
Also it's applicable to other subjects, right? And everything else that you do in
Yes. I mean, people that want to go and do science at university, they're often truly amazed at how much maths there is at university in science.
Yeah.
You know, you can do GCSE science, and to a certain extent, you can do A-level science at school without really. But then all of a sudden, you go off to do chemistry at university, and it's like, wow, I didn't expect all this maths. So yeah, it's important.
When we have consultations about subject choice for either A-levels or university, math is always one of those subjects that you can take and go with it anywhere.
Exactly, it is. I mean, I can say,
doctor, anybody, any university would want a good grade in maths.
I can safely say it is the best A-level that you can get, without question.
The most popular one for sure. Yeah.
And also, if you look at the statistics on earnings, it's the one. You know, if you want a good career, people that have got a good maths A-level earn more, generally speaking, than those that haven't. So it's got so many uses.
Absolutely. Okay, well, on that note, thank you very much. And,
Thank you, Yuliya. It's lovely talking to you.
thank you.